So, good afternoon. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Madison. I'm George Hidalgo, Club President. Thanks for joining us today. So, our opening music today will be Casey Oakers playing the national anthem. Casey, take it away. Thank you, Casey. Now, I've added fun to the four-way test this year, so let's recite our four-way plus test of the things we think, say, or do. So, number one, is it the truth? Two, is it fair to all concerned? Three, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Four, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And the fifth item I've added this year, as the banner shows, will it be fun for all concerned? So I hope we continue to have a little fun each week as we connect, grow, and serve together. Virtually for now, but we're hoping that in a couple weeks we can get to see each other in person. So we are working with the Park Hotel and hope to have more details to share with you in a few weeks. Obviously, the board of directors will approve our decision, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, and then hopefully we can start on basically mid-April with hybrid meetings in person and also online. So looking forward to that. With that, let's go on to the member interview series. So we continue to have our monthly series where a new member of our club interviews a longer-term member. This helps us not only to connect to a new member, but also to hear a little bit more about one of our longer-term members. Now this month, Alex Izquierdo interviewed longtime Rotarian and past president Carol Toussaint. So first, a little bit about Alex. Alex has been a member of our Rotary Club for 4 years. He's assistant vice president for Bank at Work with Associated Bank. Now, he was born in Weslaco, Texas, and he and his wife, Anna, make their home in Columbus. Now, he has 3 daughters. Alex holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Latin American Cultural Studies from UW Stevens Point, an MBA degree from UW Whitewater, and is currently pursuing a master's degree in organizational leadership and change at Edgewood College. So obviously a person who believes in the value of education. So here's Alex's summary of his interview with past president Carol Toussaint.
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. I hope this message finds you all well and having a great week. I had the pleasure of connecting with longtime Madisonian and the first female club president, Carol Toussaint. My first question was, hey, where are you from? And she shared that she's from a small village named Bruce, Wisconsin, that can be found on the northwestern side of Wisconsin. She said that coming from a small place helped shape her attitude and ideas. I then asked what she would like to share about her family. She said her husband, John, is retired. They have 2 sons, 3 granddaughters, and 7 great-grandchildren. I asked her about her favorite place to visit in Madison. She said, Camp Randall. She said she's missing her football. She shared that her and her family have been season ticket holders since the 1950s. Wow, that's a long time. When I asked why she joined Rotary, her response was, why did I join Rotary back in 1987? Her answer was because they asked her to. She had actually learned about the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that clubs could not continue to refuse membership to women when she was visiting her son and his family in Japan. That was back in 1985 and when she was listening to the Armed Forces radio. When she heard this, she thought maybe she'd be able to join. Soon after she joined, she then said it was a privilege to be elected to the board of directors and then to serve as the first female club president from 1992 to 1993. I then asked, can you think of any major Rotary event that sticks out in your mind from over the years? And she said, yeah. Prior to joining Rotary, I was asked to speak in 1975 on Secretary's Day. And the topic was A Woman in a Man's World. She was asked to speak about it to a bunch of her friends that were sitting in the audience. She also shared that she has some good memories of that event and also still has the clippings from the Wisconsin State Journal on her speech. When asked how she felt about giving that talk, she said that a lot of people in the audience, once again, were her friends. She also shared that there was less than a handful of women in the audience and the rest were all men. I then asked, what event sticks out in your mind where you saw the true spirit of Rotary? She said that Rotary partnered with the Children's Museum to put on a big carnival. She said so many Rotarians signed up to volunteer. There were Rotarians everywhere, working different events. Some were riding bikes, and there was even a parade. It was so nice to see the children, the Rotarians, the community come up for such a special event. She also went on to add that having the Children's Museum in downtown Madison is the best thing that has happened to the city of Madison. I followed that question with, do you have any advice to share with members about how to get the most out of Rotary? She said, take part, just participate. Take one or two things like the fellowships, get engaged and participate. She feels that the fellowships help bring people together and at times has helped keep Rotary together better. There are so many things one can get involved in. There are so many things you can get involved in. I then asked an off question, what was one of her favorite authors? She said her favorite author was Wallace Stegner, and several of his books have been read over and over. Recently, she shared that she recently found a copy of an essay titled "The Sense of Place," which was the title given to a lecture he gave in 1986 to a program of the Wisconsin Humanities Committee. Stegner taught at the UW-Madison in the 1930s. And she also said that some of you listening to this might remember the gentleman or might have read some of his pieces. My final question was, looking back and then looking at where Rotary is now, what are your thoughts? Rotary has taken leadership in acknowledging that men and women would have the background, interest, and dedication to a community. It enhanced what Rotary was capable of doing. Men and women working together make for a much stronger organization. I enjoyed my conversation with this phenomenal lady. I could sit and talk to her all day. Carol Toussaint might be known to you as a Rotarian. To me and a few others, she's a trailblazer. Once it's safe to gather, I encourage you all to stop by her table and say hello. Thank you. Have a great day.
So Mark Moody returns to our podium this week to provide us with additional information about our club's governance effectiveness plan. Mark?
Thank you, President George. Greetings, friends. I'm back to tell you more about proposed changes to our approach to club governance. But first, let me give you a quick recap of what I covered last week. Last December, the board chartered 3 task forces to make recommendations to meet the challenges we face and make this wonderful club even better. The 3 task forces are member recruitment, chaired by Roth Judd, member engagement and retention, chaired by Valerie Rank, and improving governance effectiveness, which is chaired by me. The goals of the task forces were to recommend specific actions in each of their respective domains to arrest the decline in membership and build back up to 450 to 500 members, recruit leaders representing all vocations in our community, attract and retain membership that reflects the beauty and diversity of our community, deepen member engagement to energize our connect, grow, and serve value proposition, to sustain strategic direction through leadership changes, and to adapt to the changing expectations of our membership, conditions in our community, and the competition for our members' time. On March 1st, the Task Force on Governance submitted its recommendations to the club to help it become more dynamic, better able to deliver on our brand promise and value proposition. The principal goals of the recommendations are to create better alignment, improve communication among committees and with the board, and improve our ability to execute our strategic and operational plans. Under the recommended structure, committees are aligned into 3 broad groups: engaging and growing membership, service above self, and club governance. The engaging and growing membership group will be comprised of 2 teams, the meeting experience team and the member experience team. The service above self group will be comprised of 3 teams, the service team, the youth service team, and the philanthropy team. Each team will be comprised of a team leader, the team's constituent committee chairs, and 2 or more board members. The team leaders will be accountable to the board and report to the board on team progress towards goals 2 to 4 times per year. We believe this will give committees responsible for new initiatives or addressing pressing challenges strong ties and accountability to the board to receive strategic direction as well as governance support for their efforts. Team leaders will be appointed by the president-elect and approved by the board. Team leaders can serve up to 3 years to provide strategic continuity. Let me tell you a little bit about each of these teams. The meeting experience team, team leader, committee chairs, and 2 board members would comprise this team. 3 of the constituent committees are already in existence. The 4th, meeting assistants, would be comprised of several existing committees. The team leader would have overall responsibility for the meeting experience of our clubs. Jane Coster, Pat Jenkins, and the club president would assist this team to provide a great meeting experience. The constituent committees of this team would be the Welcome Committee, the Program Committee, and the Music Committee, pretty much as they already exist, and a new Meeting Assistance Committee comprised of the current Rotary News, Rotary Information, and Information Technology Committees. Jane Coster would provide coordinating assistance to the Meeting Assistance Committee. A second group of committee chairs, team leaders, and board members would comprise the Member Experience team. While some of these constituent committees already exist, we anticipate broadening their scope and their mandates based on recommendations from the Member Retention and Engagement Task Force, which will be forthcoming early in April. The team leader would have overall responsibility for the member experience outside the weekly lunch meeting. The team's focus would be to recruit and engage members to enrich their experience and their contribution. The constituent committees of this team would be the Member Recruitment Committee with classification as a subcommittee, Orientation and Onboarding, Activation and Engagement, and Retention, which would have a number of subcommittees as shown on the slide. The Member Recruitment Committee will be tasked with recruiting new members to grow and sustain club membership between 450 and 500 members, to assure that all vocations are well represented and that our membership reflects the rich demographic diversity of the Greater Madison community. The Orientation and Onboarding Committee would be responsible for effectively introducing and welcoming new members after they join and getting them informed and engaged to contribute and receive value from their membership. An Activation and Engagement Committee would focus on deepening the member experience for all members, not just new ones, by forming new connections, engaging in new and different club activities and community service, and participating in fellowships so we can all have fun while doing good. We hope that there can be a special focus on activating members during their first 3 years of membership. No change is being recommended for fellowships at this time beyond creating the role of fellowship chair, who will be a member of the member experience team and report to the board on fellowship activities 2 to 4 times per year. The retention committee would focus on activities that help retain all members through fellowships, internal marketing, social media activities, and recognitions. The caring committee would support and encourage members experiencing life transitions, illness, or emotional stress. We hope that by working closely together, the committees in this group will deepen member engagement and improve retention, particularly among those not active in committees, projects, or fellowships. We hope this team will help all of our members feel welcome, respected, and included. The service team and team leader would have overall responsibility for the community and international service activities of the club. The following committees would comprise the service team: Community Grants Committee, Community Projects Committee, International Committee, Goodman 50 Plus Advisory, Veterans Assistance, and Recognition Committee. This new committee would be comprised of the following subcommittees, which currently exist as their own committees: Swarzynski Award, Senior Service Awards, Member Recognition, and any additional recognitions that we might create. The committees of the Youth Service Team are already in existence. This team and team leader would have overall responsibility for the community and international youth activities of our club. The constituent committees would be scholarship and youth awards. Scholar mentoring would continue as a subcommittee. The ethics symposium committee, Rotary Youth Exchange for both inbound and outbound exchange students, and the Rotaract and Interact committees, or committee, which would be combined. The philanthropy team will be comprised of the philanthropy committee and the chairs of our 2 fundraising campaigns. The philanthropy committee and team leader would have overall responsibility for the fundraising and philanthropy philosophy, strategy, and activities of the club. The practice we introduced 3 years ago of having committees led by a chair emeritus, and co-chair to help committees sustain strategic continuity would be preserved. Now, with respect to the club governance cluster, and I need to make a note to myself to never string those 3 words together again. Several existing committees will be formally designated as committees of the board to work closely with the board. They will each include a minimum of 2 board members. These board committees will be Budget and Finance, Strategic Planning, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and Governance. The Governance Committee will be comprised of a number of other committees that now work in that space. The Governance Task Force also recommends that we formally recognize the leadership team and its importance to providing stability and strategic continuity of club leadership. The leadership team would be defined as being composed of the club president, the vice president / president-elect, the immediate past president, the vice president-elect, and the executive director. Try saying that fast 3 times. The leadership team would not have any formal authority beyond what is already invested in these officers in our governing documents. They will, however, meet weekly, a practice instituted by George and I 1 year ago, to discuss issues facing the club, plan board meeting agendas, and develop ideas and proposals for consideration by the board or teams. There was considerable discussion about whether to formally constitute this leadership team as an executive committee, but the task force recommended against that in order to avoid concentrating too much authority in the hands of a very small group of people. There is some additional governance-related work that should be done. Specifically, the task force recommends that the expectations of board directors, team leaders, committee chairs, and officers be formally defined and documented. This presentation today was the second step in presenting and socializing the recommendations of the Governance Task Force to the club membership. This presentation, the text of my remarks, and the written recommendations of the task force will be posted on the member website with links included in our Friday newsletter. Next, we have 2 town hall meetings to hear from all of you and answer questions. These meetings will be this Friday at noon and next Monday at 5 p.m. These will be virtual meetings, of course. Following the town hall meetings, the task force will reconvene one last time to package final recommendations for the board to consider at its April meeting. Our new Vice President and President-elect, Teresa Holmes, will be presenting her recommendations for committee chairs to the board in April. After that, a revised set of provisional objectives, tasks, and outcomes will be distributed to committee chairs for them to review and propose final committee objectives for the coming Rotary year. As I think you can tell from my reports today and last week, the club's board and many of our members have been deeply engaged in developing ideas and recommendations to improve our club and ensure its continued success and relevance to our members and to the Greater Madison community. I think we can all be very grateful for all the hard work and commitment of these people over the past 12 months. Okay. Thank you all for your attention, and stay tuned for more information to come in the weeks ahead. George, back to you.
Thank you. That was a pretty intensive presentation, but there's been a lot of work going on. So feel free to take some time over the next couple of days and research and prepare your questions. Again, we have a meeting on Friday at noon, Q&A town hall, and also one on Monday. So please, whatever question you have, be ready for them. We'll be glad to. We'll have a pretty good representation from the appropriate committee in order to be able to answer your questions. So thank you very much, Mark, for all the hard work you put into it. So on to birthdays, and basically We're here to celebrate with a little bit of humor, wisdom that complements Rotary's mission. So we also encourage members to make an age-appropriate gift to the Madison Rotary Foundation, rounded up to $100 for our Club Synergy Scholarship Fund. So on March 21st, new member Peter Gray, who shares this quote from Jillian Horton: "Humor is just shorthand for hope. So be funny, because humor shines a powerful light on hypocrisy and absurdity while reminding us, and we are tough and alive. There is no other way to make it through." So as you can see, I think Peter is one of those people who likes to have fun, because he's got a great picture up there that he submitted for his birthday. Also on March 21st, Tim Muldowney. March 23rd, Joan Collins. Also March 23rd, Janine O'Rourke. March 24th, past President Regina Milner. March 25th, Jim Christensen. Also on the 25th, Steve Landry. On the 26th, Tom Grantham, Ken Loving, and Joy Rice. March 27th, past President Ellsworth Brown, who chaired our fund drive this year, who says, "Thank you once again, Rotarians, for your generosity in response to this fiscal year's recent community grants campaign. It was a wonderful compliment to your continued loyalty to our club and to your work on behalf of our community in this time of great need." So that was a great comment. I appreciate that, Ellsworth, because I think as Rotarians, our club did a phenomenal job raising funds for the community. March 27th, Diane Everson. March 27th, Boris Frank. So thanks to our celebrants for their contributions to the Madison Rotary Foundation. Please join me in wishing them a happy birthday. Casey Okers will play Happy Birthday on the flute. Casey? Now, onto our program. We held our monthly board meeting on March 1st on Zoom, and I encourage members to review our board minutes that we post in the member login section of our club's website. Now, we want Rotarians to see our current board members, so we asked one board member to introduce a speaker each month, and we're lucky to have Lee Richardson, who will make the introduction today. So Lee joined our Rotary Club in 2006. She's president of the Richardson Group, which provides health program management service. So she's chair of our club's Veterans Assistance Grant Committee for this year and a member of the Community Grants Committee. So without a doubt, she's dedicating a lot of her time and effort to our club and the community. So thank you, Lee. Lee is in her first of a 2-year term on our club board of directors, and she will now introduce our speaker. Lee?
Thanks, President George. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today, which is Zach Brandon, an entrepreneur and small business owner and part of the leadership team of 3 startups. He holds a bachelor's degree in political science with a concentration in management from Kent State University. Zach became president of the Greater Madison Chamber of Commerce in 2012. The Chamber of Commerce represents more than 1,300 organizations and is focused on creating a foundation for growth for the Greater Madison region. Prior to joining Madison Chamber, Zach was the director of the Wisconsin Angel Network, an early-stage investment organization focused on increasing equity investments and organization focused on increasing equity investments in Wisconsin's entrepreneurs. He has also served as Deputy Secretary of the Wisconsin Department of Commerce and served in the agency's Senior Policy and External Affairs role. We look forward to your presentation, Zach, and we have made a contribution to Rotary International Polio Plus Fund as a way to say thanks for speaking today. I do also want to mention that if you have questions during today's presentation, use the chat to ask your question, and President George will be watching the chat for questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's great to see everyone. I appreciate the standing ovation, but completely unnecessary. And one of the things that's interesting about the time that we're in is that when you come to a Rotary luncheon where we have to be necessarily distant from each other and remote, you don't get the feedback of the applause, but I also don't get the feedback of your dishware. So hopefully this will be a great conversation about where we have been and where we are headed. The talk today is There's Light in the Dark. And I think it's important. This is my fourth time speaking to Rotary in this capacity. And so I came in 2013 and told you about the efforts to make Greater Madison an international hub of innovation. I came back in 2016 and talked to you about the need to develop an entrepreneurial economy and to make sure that the economy was broad and worked for everyone. In 2018, I came back and told you that we needed to change our brand position, that the future of the workforce, those that are younger and people of color, weren't bought into the traditional Madison brand of the idealist or Pleasantville, and that there was a necessity based on national research that we had done to change the way we think about ourselves, most importantly because we wanted to be able to match it to what people thought of us. And so in 2018, I always start these with telling you what I said last time. So when I was here last time, I ended with this slide. And I talked about the need to change that brand and the need to, I told you the story of Leanne Heiss, who was a recruit to Madison, and how she discovered Madison through a Google search, and that we needed to stop leaving the chance of recruitment to an algorithm and needed to take our own destiny into our hands. And so after that, 19 came, and 19 held a lot of opportunity and a lot of potential. The defining question of 2019 was, where will this young talent go? Where will this diverse talent go? And we knew the trends were headed in the right direction. We started to see headlines in the San Francisco Business Times like this that said 90% of tech workers that were polled plan to leave their jobs. And this paper opined on its own that the high cost of living and constrained housing supply in the Bay Area heightened the appeal of cities like Seattle, Portland, Austin, and Madison, Wisconsin. As much as I wish we didn't have the moniker of Wisconsin to have to redefine us, it says something that when the business editors of the San Francisco Business Times see you as competition, it means that something good is on the horizon. We also saw that back in 19 that there was exodus talk around young professionals. 41% of young professionals said they intended to leave Silicon Valley, really the world's marquee innovation hub and tech hub. Our peer organization, a similar organization called the Bay Area Council, does a poll every year. And in that, we were monitoring what they were seeing, which is that area millennials in the Bay Area, for the first time since they started the poll, were saying that they would likely leave the Bay Area. And 60-some% of them said that they would leave to go anywhere else. So they weren't staying in California. And nearly 20-some% of them were focused on places that created a better quality of life and had lower cost of living. We also saw trends that were showing demographic changes in Madison during 2019. We know that 3 out of every 4 new movers, so recent movers in 2019, so those who were new to Madison, were all in the millennial demographic. And that caused CNBC to have this headline that Madison, Wisconsin is the new Mecca for millennials. And so we saw Madison had the largest population share of millennials, but also the largest share of millennials moving to any one city. And they were coming here and earning more money. And so you can see down below a 10% differential that the millennials that were in Madison were making roughly $62,000, and the inbound millennials were making 10% more at $68,000, so driving wages up along the way. That transformation of our economy and of our recruitment and putting Madison at the head of the country's millennial recruitment drive caused this headline in Inc. magazine that said, this is why Madison attracts more millennials than any other city. And also down in the corner, you see Brookings data that says we also had the highest educated millennials as well. 58% of millennials in 2019 had at least a bachelor's degree, which tied with Boston for number 1. USA Today had headlines that looked like this, that if you're looking for the best cities to go after graduation, for job and social life and affordable living, Madison was your place. We had the most concentrated economy of 20-somethings. You might wonder why I just switched from millennial to 20-somethings, which is because in 2019, it turned out the millennials aged 2 and they became into their 30s. And so if you wanted to define the difference between the two, you had to actually separate millennials from 20-somethings. And so millennials in this talk are 25 to 34, and this is 20 to 29-year-olds. And so again, Madison leading the country in that young demographic. When it came to educational attainment, again, across the entire spectrum of our economy, Madison ranked third, just slightly behind Washington, D.C. And then we saw, coming with this change in demographics, we also saw a change in both tech talent labor pool. And so you can see that from 2013 to 2018, which was the most recent data in 2019, that Madison ranked second, just behind Charlotte, for percent of labor pool change in the tech sector. And then when it came to labor concentration, so what percentage of your economy is concentrated in the tech sector, you can see that Madison came in number 7. You look above that, those are the names that we all universally recognize as the dominant and preeminent tech economies of this country. And so again, validation that we knew we were on and headed in the right direction. And then when it came to the other side of the equation, so less about the talent and more about the jobs and the types of jobs, when it came to the share of national employment, so every city in America is growing their tech sector. Their tech jobs are growing in number because more and more jobs are requiring skills that are digital. And we know in our region that 3/4 of all jobs today require at least a medium to high skill set when it comes to digital. That's a 6x increase since 2002. And we've seen a 50% decrease in low digital skills. And so we know that we are seeing a significant trend line across the country that converts economies from low digital skills to high digital skills. But everyone's talking about their tech economy. You recognize many of the cities on this graph, but there's only a few cities, in fact, only 11 cities that are actually growing their share. So everyone's growing in raw data and raw percentage, but how many cities are actually growing their share of these types of jobs, of these jobs of the future? Madison is one of only 11 metros, and frankly, the smallest of the metros that are doing it. You'll also see a lot of cities on this list that claim to be the next tech hub that are actually losing their market share. 2019 also brought the designation that Madison became officially the country's most diverse economy. I mean that not from a demographic standpoint, but from economic standpoint. What you see in this bar chart is these are the top line codes for most sectors that the federal government looks at. The blue lines are our penetration into those sectors. That's our qualifications in those sectors. The gray hash marks are just the typical metro, so what we would benchmark ourselves against. You can see the lumpiness in the gray and the stability of the blue. And this shows you that what comes with Madison is stability, not just that's based on the old equation of private sector and public sector jobs, which has trended significantly towards the private sector over. Women also did well in Madison in the 2019 analysis. Here's Forbes magazine that these are the top cities for women to have the most success per capita. And so 2019 all summed up to be really this headline again in CNBC that said these are the cities poised to be the next hotspot. 2019 seemed like the catapult that was going to propel our community forward as we top this list. And then 2020 came, and in early 2020, the news kept coming and was positive. Brookings put out a report about how you would spread tech and innovation across the entire economy, particularly thinking about the areas that are off the coasts. So when you think about the cities that define our competitiveness internationally, globally, if we want to continue to compete with our competitors around the globe, what would we need to do? And part of this thesis is that you can't have just 5 superstar cities. And so Brookings came up with this report that and with this headline in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel that said the solution to the United States challenges around innovation is Madison. And Madison, if we had 10 more Madisons, we could foster the tech growth that we would need in the heartland to continue to make Madison, or to continue to make the United States and Madison more competitive globally. You can see here's the raw data, and this is why they say that, is that you can see the inputs I'll leave to you to be able to look at across, but they revolve around STEM and patents, and the type of jobs and types of degrees and the type of sectors that we have here. But maybe the most important is the far right column, which shows you that when it comes to the rankings, that Madison outpaced the rest of the country by more than double. And so as this conversation began, it was about a $100 billion investment in these types of communities in order to drive innovation through our economy. The wind was at our back, the momentum was headed our direction. Epic became one of the showcase examples of what you could do in what they termed the heartland, but you could, this idea that you could build a globally competitive, market dominating company like Epic right here in Madison and in Verona became part of that story. And you can see Judy Faulkner, who generally focuses on the business and on customers, came to DC with us to talk about Epic and the story of Epic. And then this virus happened. And everything went blank. The signal was lost. All of the momentum, all of the conversations about what the future might hold just kind of disappeared. And what we knew is that when we were coming back, that whether it was during the pandemic or after the pandemic, that Madison and the story that we were building about Madison would be muted, that it would be less vibrant, that it would be harder to tell that story, partly because people wouldn't be able to be here to see it. So that we set out during the pandemic to better understand, how do we make Madison more vivid? How do we illuminate and brighten the story and put a shiny finish on something that was probably going to look very matte when it came to the city in the pandemic? And we knew that we would be virtual, much like we are today, that we would have necessary in-person limits, but we needed to be able to show the reality of Madison through a virtual lens. And there's two words in there that I think are important. I'd encourage you now, I'll take a moment from my presentation to say, I assume most of you have your phone nearby. I'd ask you to take your phone out, get your camera ready, because I'm going to show you some of this technology firsthand through your screen. So you're just going to hold your phone up to a QR code that I'm going to put on your screen, and your phone will transport you to this new virtual meets reality technology. The idea behind it was to, again, target that workforce of the future, to make sure that we were thinking about an inclusive economy, that we were thinking about what are the demographics that will define the workforce of the future. And certainly that comes with education and skills, and those digital skills that we talked about. Certainly diversity in the workforce was going to be important, in race and ethnicity and gender. And across all demographics, we knew that for Madison to be competitive, it would need to be competitive across every demographic sector. And we knew that we needed to reach people where they were. And so here's the moment. So if you take we'll enlarge this for you. If you take your camera out and you hold the camera over the QR code that you see in the top left-hand corner, you'll be transported to a version of the virtual reality technology. It won't be in stereo because you don't have a virtual reality device, but I wanted you to be able to see what we've developed locally. So locally built, locally designed, so for Madison, of Madison, by Madison, for the good of Madison. And so I'll give you just a couple more seconds to take a scan of the QR code. But if those of you who maybe it's not working or you don't have your phone, I'm going to give you a screen grab of what everybody else is seeing. So let me go to the next screen. And so this is what people see as they're transported into this condo in downtown Madison. It could be an apartment, could be a condo. All of this is completely virtually created. None of it is real, except for the picture on the outside is a drone shot that we laid in. You know that this isn't real because, as you can tell by the elevation, we're looking down at the Capitol. And height limitations in Madison would absolutely prohibit that. And so for those of you who are trying to figure out where this condo is and how it violated the law, it is not real. It just exists in the virtual world. But we wanted to get it high enough to show people both lakes and all the things. And you can see Bucky in the corner. And if you are in the VR experience, by tapping on any of those objects where you see a target, you can go kayak on Lake Monona. You can hover over the terrace. You can be downtown and see the Capitol in all of its glory. So 2021, so where are we today? And what happens after 2021? What are the technology opportunities, but more importantly, what are the economic indicators that we are looking at and looking forward to? The first is we'll be able to restart our economy. We have moved through relief to reopening, which is where we are today. I would, just as a side note, I would, implore all of you to continue to wear masks, to get vaccinated. The best vaccine is the one that's in your arms, and to get out and spend money. It is you that will start the economy, and that starting of the economy or restarting of the economy is what will start our recovery. The good news is that the data, much like in 2019, shows that the wind is at our back coming into and through this economic recovery. Starting with data from 2019, so we wanted to go back and look at what was the most recent data that we could look at. And so knowing about, first thing you do is assess risk. And so looking at what is our risk profile when it comes to the most affected industries. So industries that are foot traffic dependent, consumer facing. You can see that Orlando and Nevada or Vegas are in the deep red, which means they have a big hole to climb out of. When we looked at that data from Brookings, what we noticed was that Madison ranked near the bottom, 335 out of 384. And this is one list where you want to be in the bottom. And then when we reshuffled and recut the data, we looked at just the largest metros. So Madison's in the top 80 metros as far as size, almost creeping into the top 70. And so we wanted to see metros that had more than 50,000 jobs at risk. And in that scenario, Madison ranked the fourth lowest in the country. So we knew that our risk profile was a bit lower than our competitors. Bloomberg did an analysis that was really a very deep dive into all things that you should take into consideration in the economy. And one of the big things that helped propel us forward on this list is the diversity of our economy that I talked about. But Bloomberg's headline is, these are the cities that are likely going to recover faster after the lockdown. You can see the subhead there, Boston, the Bay Area, in Madison, Wisconsin. You can't pay for that subhead to have Boston, Bay Area, and Madison all in the same line. Again, there's that pesky modifier of Wisconsin that we continue to work on, just having Madison be a standalone name. If you want to see where we ranked, not just in the Midwest, but nationally, this is what it looks like. Certainly Madison dominated the Great Lakes in the Midwest. Also good news for Milwaukee, who came in number 2. But when you look at nationally, you expect to see things like San Jose and San Francisco. You expect, to see Seattle. These are the dominant places in Boston. What you don't expect to see is Madison above Seattle when it comes to the speed of recovery. Forbes took another look using Moody's analytics. Actually, Moody's did it. Forbes just reported on it, which, and in that analysis, it was Durham, North Carolina, and Madison were the surge centers. They looked at type of jobs and education required for those jobs. You had to have at least 30% of your jobs, in that qualifying sort of high skill, high digital skill set. But also then looking at this idea that people are not going to want to be in the densest places, that people will want quality of life. People will want culture and arts and sports and entertainment and great restaurant selection, but they just don't need 100 of it. And so they're looking for quality of life and cost of living, and that's the green line that we put in, which is a cost line that we bent upward because we think cost will continue to be part of the equation. And you can see Madison in that scenario does great as well. Realtor Magazine, which is the arm of the National Realtors Association, said these are the cities that are going to lead the pandemic. I wish they were in order, but they're just I think done by alphabetical order, but not by ranking. But again, a great list to be on. And then starting to look at real raw data. So U-Haul every year looks at the trends that they see about those who are moving from one place to another. Now, granted, I will qualify this with you have to have rented a U-Haul. So this does exclude people who maybe don't have enough stuff to rent a U-Haul, or people who have so much stuff that they're renting a much larger van line. But when looking at these trends around U-Haul, we have monitored this for years. Madison's never been in the top 25. And in fact, all of the cities that dominate this ranking are generally south and west until this year or last year, but the data is being analyzed from this year, is that Madison came in 5th. And then you can see the rest of the list is still much, a lot of Florida, Alabama, but a lot of south, a lot of west, with the exception of Madison. And then we're seeing raw data that also shows that just people are moving to Madison in much higher numbers. In fact, LinkedIn data during the recession and the pandemic showed that Madison topped the country in a ratio of inflow to outflow. So more people are moving to Madison versus leaving than any other city in America. And you can see what's happening in some of those larger metros down at the bottom, the inversion of what's happening there. When we look specifically at tech, you can see that Madison again dominates and significantly dominates when it comes to tech migration. So people moving to Madison for tech jobs versus people leaving. For every one person that leaves, we're gaining 1.7 or so people, which is a significant increase, and again, the highest in the country. Forbes and Inc. have weighed in on what that could mean. We're digging deeper into the data to better understand. Is it a trend line? And it appears it is, because for 2 reports in a row, that's been the case. And then here's why that is. So using some CBRE data, we looked at. You can see Madison in the bottom right sort of quadrant of your screen. Those above it in the shaded area are when you're looking at a value. This is a value axis. So on the vertical you see the labor cost, and on the horizontal you see the labor quality. There's only a handful of cities that are on par with or have higher labor quality when it comes to the sectors of the future. So Madison ranks in that very, very top part. But when you think about who they are and what the cost of that labor is, there's nobody that is in a better value position than Madison. In fact, there's only just a few cities that even compete with us when it comes to price and cost of labor versus the talent and the quality that you get. And then finally, let me say, so I save time for questions. We've seen a lot of data around young people, and I've talked about young people, but just recently, Money Magazine said that Madison was one of the 10 best places in America to retire. They said they were surprised. I think we were a little bit surprised too. One of the things that happened during the pandemic, after 100 or so virtual events like this, my eyesight started to go. I'd like to say it's not age, that it's just the pandemic did it. And I can't quite make it out, but I think that might be Stu Levitan on a skateboard. And so there's a lot of question about what's at the end of the tunnel. Right? There's a lot of this, wondering about what is that light in the darkness? Is that the end of this long pandemic tunnel? Is that a freight train headed our way? And I can tell you unequivocally that the end of that tunnel, that light is hope. And it's not hope that's just guaranteed that something great's going to happen here. It's hope that we will put ourselves in the right position to be the ones who seize this opportunity to build the Madison that we aspire to be, to build the Madison that we can be. And I think that is the goal that this organization and the chamber set out to more than 100 years ago when they wrote one of the first pitch decks for Madison and acknowledged that this is not a perfect city, but that it was the city of the future. And if we can do the right things, if we can build an inclusive economy, and I'm excited about the speakers that you have coming up in the coming weeks that will spend a lot of time talking about what that inclusive economy can look like. But if we can build an economy that recruits and retains the world's talent, if we can have the right mix of jobs and the right mix of opportunities, we can be what is the opportunity in front of us, which is the city of the future. So with that, I appreciate the attention. Thank you again for the wonderful applause and the standing ovation, and I'll take some questions.
Thank you very much, Zach, for that presentation. And we have a few minutes for questions. So as a reminder to use the chat function if you have a question, and I'll ask Zach questions from that listing. So with that, the first question we have comes from Roberta Gassman, and she says, how do you feel about the physical and economic state of our downtown now and recovery timeline ahead, which kind of dovetails with the question I asked earlier about the city council not interested in helping State Street. So can you elaborate for the rest of our fellow Rotarians on that subject? Absolutely. That's a big one.
Hello, Secretary Gassman. It's good to see you. Good to hear from you. A fantastic question. I know I saw in the chat earlier that Jason from DMI is on the virtual meeting as well. I know we all know and understand the value and the importance of the downtown. The things that we're looking at, and we did a survey with partners, including DMI and Destination Madison, and the Madison Black Chamber and the Latino Chamber, and a handful of other chambers from around the region, about trying to understand not just what companies are going through today, so that we could use that to influence the outcome of the reopening plan, but also a lot of questions about what does reopening look like in the office? What does return to work look like? And I think there are, I think on one hand there's a little bit of Madison hand wringing. I can tell you that I have even during the pandemic both traveled and virtually traveled to many other cities. And even though what we saw with the rioting and the looting that occurred separate and distinct from the peaceful demonstrations and protests after the murder of George Floyd, that didn't register on a national level. I mean, those, when you talk to people nationally, they weren't saying, "Oh, I saw what was happening in Madison." So I think there's a little bit of our own hand wringing about what this means. But certainly we know, both from the data and anecdotally, that downtown businesses have suffered, they've struggled, and particularly those that are foot traffic dependent and consumer facing. And so again, I go back to wear a mask, get vaccinated, and go out and spend money. I mean, you can see the trend lines. And what I would tell you is all of us remember when the pandemic started, you couldn't turn on a TV, you couldn't listen to a radio station, you couldn't open a newspaper without a bend the curve conversation, flatten the curve, right? We wanted the entire country to be responsible in a way that allowed us to flatten the infection curve so that we didn't overwhelm our healthcare infrastructure. Well, there's another opportunity and another necessity, which is to bend the curve upward. Because what's happening now is we have a reopening curve. So we are slowly reopening our economy, 0% to 25%, 25 to 50%, 50% hopefully to soon to 75%. And ultimately, we will be at 100% reopening. But if we don't bend confidence along with that, if we don't make sure that confidence meets the reopening capacity opportunities, we have missed as a community. And so what I would say to you is that be confident. When Rotary is ready to meet in person again, be one of those people that says, I can be socially distant, so I can wear a mask, and I feel confident in the trend lines that we are seeing. And so, we're going to need to do that. And people are going to need to return to work, that the downtown economy requires, we need offices to return so that all those other businesses that make up the vibrant fabric of this community, the things that are the tapestry of our community, are those businesses those are the things that make us special, and we need to be there to support them.
Thank you, Zach. We've got three questions that are kind of a similar vein. One is from Ron Luskin, then Genia Stevens, and also Willie Larkin. And it really, I guess the best way to summarize it is, what can Madisonians do to make our community more welcoming to individuals from diverse backgrounds and people of color? I mean, if you look at 2 or 3 things that we could do, what can we all do?
That's great. It's a great question, and one I anticipated that I was going to get. So if you bring my slides back up, let me just... if we can just click on the slide so I can advance it. Thank you. So what are the goals of an inclusive economy? And I promise you, I did not put Ron or Willie or anybody else up to asking that question. It's that important that I knew, but I also know that you're going to have speakers coming up, the next 3 that are going to do a great job of illuminating this conversation. I think the first thing is to understand that the recovery will not be equal for everyone. And that when you see there is the blue line is the recovery trend that I was talking about. The orange line is the risk of what happens if we don't do something to ensure that the economy is equitable, that the recovery is equitable. And so we hear a lot about the K-shaped economy. This is what it actually looks like if we don't do the work that's necessary. And so making sure that we're focused on it. I think understanding the words of inclusion are important too, with all respect to Shel Silverstein and the Giving Tree. Here's an artist rendition of how you can think about those other questions about, so what is inequality? Right, so inequality is this unequal access to opportunities. All the apples are on one side of the tree. The sunlight is on that side of the tree. The wind blows the apples to the ground so that you don't have to wait for the apple. The apple just comes to you, and the other person is just sat there looking at the tree wondering, where's my apple? You talk about all these apples. Equity is another one that we hear a lot about, and equity has become a more common business term over the last decade. And it's equity is the even distribution of tools and of assistance. But as you can see, if the trunk of the tree, if the structure of the system is bent the wrong way or bent the other way, putting in some type of equality mechanism isn't going to solve the problem. And so, more and more we hear about equity, and equity has become a business term. And I love the word equity when we're talking about inclusive economy, because equity in business means ownership. So those of you who are business members of Rotary know that when someone says, I have equity in a company, it means I own a piece. And so what does equity in your community look like? Owning a piece of your community, owning a seat at the table, the economic table. And that's good, and that can help address those inequities. But the real question I think that we have in front of us, the question that all of us should be thinking about, particularly those that are on the side of the tree that the system bends towards, is what does the role of justice play in business? Justice is not a business term, but can it be a business term? And what does justice look like in using the weight and the hand of business to redistribute and to straighten and to realign that questions of systems? And so thinking about fixing the system so that the sun shines on all sides of the tree, that the access is even distributed, and that when we think about what are the mechanisms that we all have to put in place to ensure an economy that works for all of us, I think justice is a business term. And so I would say to you is that the focus for what we can be doing is to make sure that we have an economy that's equitable, that people that are enabled to have full upward mobility no matter where they are born and who they are born to, that we have the ability to participate in that economy so that all parts of our economy can start a business that can benefit from wealth creation, and they have the ability to save and transfer that wealth to the next generation. An economy that grows so that we know that it's not episodic, it's not just a one-time thing, that we can all have faith in the fact that we're all rowing in the same direction for the same greater good. An economy that's sustainable, that making sure that there's generational well-being and generational wealth creation, and then that it's stable. Business and the economy thrives in a time of stability, and making sure that we have a stable participation in the economy. Know that we're committed to it as an organization. Our membership is committed to it. I look forward to seeing what the other speakers with Dr. Anthony and Jason Fields, both friends of mine, bring to Rotary in the next couple of weeks to talk about it. But know that we're here as partners, and it will take all of us to make sure that that K-shaped economy, that bottom leg of the K gets bent upwards so that everybody benefits from the future economy that Madison has the potential to have.
Thank you very much. And it's great having the slides too, to be ready to answer that question. So what is the Chamber's position on sufficient funding of the UW to maintain its research and teaching excellence? It is not lost on any of us. So when you talk about that tree, and going back to the economy and the analogy of that tree, and back to the giving tree, it shouldn't be lost. It's not lost on the Chamber, and it shouldn't be lost on anyone in this community, that every company in this community has grown up in the shadow of one of the world's great research universities. It's not happenstance. It didn't just happen because people got lucky. Every company that you talk to has some tethering, some tie back to, some ability to put roots into fertile soil that came from the university. If you think that cutting that tree down or limiting the growth of that tree somehow will yield the same result for the future, you are wrong. I do know that one of the things that we have to do as a community, that we have to do as community leaders and as business leaders, is that we have to make sure that we tell the story of the university in one that the apple falls very far from the tree. Because if our flagship university, if the great university of this state becomes Dane County's university, then we all lose. And we need to tell the story across the state that the apple of fortune falls very far from that tree. And it is one of our top priorities to make sure that the university is funded, particularly as it comes to research. And I mentioned it earlier, but that Brookings report that talked about how to grow the economy, and the university is a major part of that. And if that $100 billion does pass, and Senator Schumer seems to be hell-bent on making sure that it does, the University of Wisconsin-Madison will be one of the great benefactors of that funding. Thank you. Final question here is from Jeremiah Robinson, who says, I know people who live in San Francisco and Austin during exponential growth, when those cities grew unaffordable for non-tech folks. Is there a city which grew wealthy quickly like this with a different outcome?
That's a great question, Jeremiah, one that we think of. And if I had more time, I'd bring up another set of slides, because I thought maybe someone would ask this question too. The reality of it is that when we looked at the growth of those communities, they grew much faster than Madison is growing. Now, that doesn't mean that Madison won't hit a momentum that starts to peak there. But I think the question there is that we know. We have watched Austin, we have watched Boston, we have watched Seattle, we have watched Portland, we have watched San Francisco, we have watched the Bay Area in its entirety. We know that inequity is accelerated and that income disparities are occurred. And if we can't fix for that, then shame on us.
Well, thank you very much for an outstanding presentation, Zach. And let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you. It's great being with you. Good. Great.
Go that way, and then I'll wrap up. Okay. So again, outstanding presentation. Learned a lot. There was phenomenal questions. So thank you very much for joining us today. We are adjourned.